Hi, good morning, everybody. Gonna wait a few more minutes so everybody's logged in.
And Antonio's even here from Portugal.
Yeah, Antonio, nice to see you. When's your next trade mission? Are you having another one this year?
Oh yeah, I didn't realize the mute. I was unmuted. Hello, how are you, Sarah?
Hi, Antonio.
Hello, Tashia. Thank you for the invite. Yes, it'll be in June, Sarah. In
Awesome.
June 22nd through the 4th of July. Call it the 4th of July in Portugal.
All right.
Portugal is like the 51st state, so why not do it? And then also in October. Good to be here. Good to be here. Thank you. Thank you.
Sign me in, Antonio.
Antonio, can you put your contact information and the dates on the chat so we all can maybe perhaps get together and work on this?
No, I don't. I'm a secret agent. I'm a secret
come on,
agent.
come
I don't
on.
want anybody to know where I'm. No, of course, I'll do that. Thank you.
Yeah, but if
Awesome.
all of our panelists could do the same, that would be wonderful. If you'd put your name, state, and email address or website in the chat, that would be terrific. Welcome, Elizabeth. Welcome, Renee.
Actually, a lot of people say they can't log in because it keeps on saying they already logged in to a different device.
I got that error message as well.
Yeah, so can we resend them the original link?
Yeah, I had that too, but she resent me a link, so I got in.
Hi, Dawn. Where are you? Oh, there you are. How's the weather in Florida?
It got some raining earlier, but it's now just sunshine and beautiful. We just
Awesome.
love it here.
Okay, let's see.
Excuse me.
Antonio, don't forget to put the date of the trade mission. A lot of us want to, or how do we sign up for it?
Okay, yeah, I'll do that. Well, I'll have the full details by the end of next week, and
Okay, cool.
and then I'll probably make a post of it as well, or actually create a website, and then for people to contact. So thank you, but for now, it's just I'll put the dates in there. Trade mission, if you like. I mean, that's no problem. I'll put it there, and then I'll have full details. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you.
Absolutely. Well, it is 3:06, and because we want to honor the time that our speakers have given to us, let's just go ahead and get started. First of all, I would like to say welcome to everybody. And as a good Aussie, I would say good day. Good day to you all. Howdy. So it is so nice to see so many of you, so many familiar faces. And I hope those that I haven't had the privilege of meeting, that we will just start building a strong relationship from here on. So with that said, I would like to suggest that all of you input your contact information in the chat. This is a great opportunity for each one of us to network with each other, do business together in the future and so on. Also wanted to let you know that this Zoom event is being recorded, and we're also going to be live streaming through Facebook. And with that said, I wanted to give you guys a little bit of idea of the global committee from TIGAR, which is the Inland Gateway Association of Realtors. We're located out here in Riverside, California, and we are a new network, a new committee. We originated last year, and with the help of our past president, Adriana Niguel, let's see, do I see her? I thought I saw her. Anyway, she is one who really helped us originate the committee. So I want to give the kudos to her for helping us. And also, just so you know, she is also a committee member for NAR Global Business and Alliance Committee. And with that said, our committee itself, we are comprised of 9 members. very, very active members. And we cannot do any of what we're able to do, like today, putting the Zoom events together and all the education and so forth, without our liaison, who is Ashley Martindale. She is literally my right hand. I am so honored and grateful to have her as my liaison. With that said, I want to say thank you, Ashley, for all you do for our committee. Although I don't see her in here. Oh, there she is. There she
You're
is. Okay.
welcome.
Thank you, Ashley. Okay, so the focus of TIGAR's Global is to introduce and educate our members regarding global market and how we can grow our business globally through referral, network, and trade missions. And like I mentioned before, just want to remind everybody, this is being recorded, so make sure that you are muted. And if you have any questions, we're going to have a Q&A at the end of the session after all the presenters are done with their presentation. But if you do have any questions, feel free to write your questions on the chat, so we will go over afterwards as well, okay? So with that said, I want to start the event by stating TIGAR's global mission statement. And our statement is as follows. The Global Cultural Committee of the Inland Gateway Association of Realtors' purpose is to provide its members with global market updates on inbound and outbound transactions through education and networking, as well as building partnership with global-minded real estate agents and the local market. And with that said, let us go ahead and start the event. We have a very short, brief video that we put together to just show you a little bit of imagery regarding Brisbane, Canberra, Melbourne, and Sydney. Go ahead.
O fone aqui, tá, Carol? Vai não.
Thank you, Ashley. So with that said, our moderator of the day is Tashia Hinchliffe. And I was introduced to her by a fellow CIPS, which is Certified International Property Specialist Realtor. And CIPS, I don't know if most of you probably do know, is a designation for realtors from US and abroad who wishes to develop and grow their international real estate business. It provides us with the tool, knowledge, researchability, network opportunities, and tools to globalize your business. CIPS network allows us to find other similar CIPS agents across the world for referral and businesses connection. But most importantly, what we have learned from this network is the fact that we're able to build long-lasting friendship with one another globally. So let me go ahead and start by introducing a moderator. Her name is Tashia. Tashia Hinchliffe is a global real estate consultant and global director for RE/MAX Estate Properties based on LA. She assists clients with residential, investment, and second home properties. She's also thrilled to aid nonprofit maximizing sale proceeds for donated property while publicizing the mission of their organization. She has lived in California, Connecticut, New York, France, Belgium, and England. She holds dual citizenship with France and speaks French, bonjour, and Spanish, ¿cómo estás? Tanya donates 2% of each closed escrow to cancer research, education, homelessness, rescue dogs, the arts, and at-risk kids. While serving on the board of directors for CAR and NAR, she traveled twice to Australia to meet with Real Estate Institute of Australia and Real Estate of New South Wales leaders. She has also served on NAR Global Business and Alliance Committee, the Community and Global Real Estate Committee at South Bay Association of Realtors, and chairs CAR Global Real Estate Forum. She has an MBA from Yale, is a member of ARIA and CREA, and has earned a CIPS, RSPS, Palos Verdes Specialist, TRC, AHWD, and GMA designations. The Certified International Property Consultant certification from Dubai Land Department, that's where I'm going next week, and is a member of the Institute for Luxury Home Marketing. With that said, I'm going to turn it over to our guest and moderator, Tashia. Take it away.
Thank you so much, Sarah. And I can't tell you how excited I was when you called and asked me who I might know down in Oz who could tell us about their wonderful country. I have had the immense honor, pleasure, and fortune to actually be hosted down in Australia during my 2 trips there, with the relationship that the California Association of Realtors had with the Real Estate Institute of Australia, and with Tim, who is with us, Real Estate Institute of New South Wales, with their respective institutes, or what we call here in the States, associations. So it really was just a huge pleasure to have an excuse to call up all my mates down under and say, hey, hop on and teach us how things are done down in Australia. So without further ado, I want to get into the talk, because you don't need to hear a bunch of background. You need to hear about how we as realtors here, or our clients or our friends who want to either invest in Australia, who want to relocate there, who want to refer business there or get referrals from there. Those are all the different things that we're going to be covering. And we're going to try and share with you some of the tips to do that. And also, as Sarah alluded, many of those on the call today are CIPS designees, or Certified International Property Specialists. That is a designation from the National Association of Realtors. We also have many people on both foreign and local who are members of NAR and thus realtors. So Doug Disher, who'll be with us, is a CIPS designee, and Doug and Michael and Robin are all international members of NAR and thus also part of our realtor family. And I'm pretty sure that Antonio, who's with us from Portugal, is also a realtor at NAR, yeah, and a CIPS designee. So it's definitely a great club to be a part of. And then another immensely prestigious international real estate networking group and association to be a part of is FIAPSI. And Robin is just a, we can say, kick booty person in that arena. She was the world president of FIAPSI, so she's going to share with us about that organization too. So it's a great learning opportunity for everyone about Australia, but also about ways to get involved or to further your involvement in global real estate. Okay. So without further ado, I want to present the first of 4 of my wonderful Australian friends, Robin Waters. As I mentioned, she is a realtor. She also, though, has an extremely prestigious title, which is OAM. And that is that she was recognized in June 2020. So we're talking about COVID year, mind you. She was recognized in June 2020 on the Queen's Birthday Honor List with what is called the Order of Australia for services to the real estate and the community. This woman is amazing, wonderful, and really powerful in the Australian and international real estate community. So Robin is in Mont Albert, just outside of Melbourne, in the state of Victoria. She's a licensed real estate agent who operates as a sole, excuse my eyes while I'm looking up here at my notes. You know, I know all these people personally. You don't necessarily want to hear all the stories about how we all partied together down under. But Robin's a licensed estate agent. She operates as a sole trader, providing real estate services to a select portfolio of clients. She is a past president of the Real Estate Institute of Victoria, their state institute. She is, as I briefly mentioned earlier, the first Australian woman to be appointed as the world president of the International Real Estate Federation, or FIOPSI, and that was in May of 2014. During Robin's term of office with FIOPSI, she continued to expand its influence through its vital work with the United Nations. FIOPSI holds consultative status at the UN Economic and Social Council, and FIOPSI representatives actively participate in programs relevant to property issues worldwide, similar to what NAR does here in the States. In particular, they work with the protection of property rights, sustainability, and affordability. FIOPSI joined the UN Global Compact and incorporates the 10 principles of the compact in their strategic planning. Robin's both the Real Estate Institute of Australia, or REIA, and the FIOPSI trustee to the International Ethics Standards Coalition. You don't have to worry if you send a referral her way. She's an extremely ethical woman. She's a fellow of the Real Estate Institute of Australia and a fellow of the Royal Institution of Chartered Surveyors. That is a worldwide organization, but it's also based in the UK. So each of our presenters are going to address several specific topics and bring us up to speed on their respective city or state in Australia. And then afterwards, more than happy to field questions. They're making themselves available for that. So please post questions in the chat, either on Facebook Live if you're following us there, or in the Zoom chat, and we'll address those after the four presenters speak. But the topic specifically that Robin's going to be covering for us, in addition to giving us a bit of a background about the Melbourne market, is her experience with FIOPSI and the work that they did in the commencement of something called the City We Need project, for which the fifth book, The City We Need is Affordable, has just been published, if I'm not mistaken. Robin can correct me. And she'll also speak a little bit about the influence of COVID on the Australian market and why the US and the UK tend to be the biggest investors in Australia. Robin, turning it over to you, beautiful woman.
Thanks for talking me up, Tasha. That was really nice. Thank you. So Melbourne is the most locked down city in the world. And we've traded our prominent title that we had previously as being the world's most livable city to the world's most locked down city. We had 246 days in lockdown. We had a curfew. We couldn't go to work. We had limited distances we could travel. So when you look back on that 2020 and 2021 now, you think to yourself, oh, I just don't even believe that that's how we were living and what we could do. We ran out of toilet paper in the supermarket. So, just one of those phenomenons of lockdowns that made people behave crazily. But when you do come to Melbourne, we're one of the most diverse cities in the world. We've got a really great amount of cultural diversity in the fact that our 50% of Victorians are either born overseas or have international parentage. And so we're a state of people from more than 200 countries. So that creates a situation where we have different social needs, we have different government needs to be able to service that diverse community. So we are really an interesting place to be. We've consistently ranked as one of the world's most livable cities, and our cohesive and stable society, our healthcare, our education, and our world-class infrastructure, although there could be some argument about that at the moment. We're doing railway crossing reductions, and so there's disruption all the way around Melbourne with roads being closed, and you have to travel around little suburbs to be able to get to the next one at the moment, and a major reconstruction of one of our prominent east-west exits from the city, and that's creating real difficulty for people moving around. It adds an extra half an hour, 3/4 of an hour to your trip across to the western side of the city. But we're truly a magnificent city to live, work and study, and Australia is one of our major exports is education, and we have a great amount of student accommodation available in the city, although most of it's been empty now for 2 years. Our world famous festivals, which we have the Comedy Festival, the International Film Festival, the Melbourne Food and Wine Festival, we get people attracted there from across the globe. We currently have Nigella Lawson in Melbourne at the Melbourne Food and Wine Festival, and we have innovative design buildings to accommodate all of those different events. We put on spectacular large-scale sporting events. We have the Tennis Australia hosts the Australian Open. We have the Melbourne International Grand Prix at Formula One Grand Prix. And we have, of course, Melbourne, the great AFL, the Australian Football League. And it started in Melbourne last night, and everyone's gone crazy again about football. So that's our winter sport. And when we say football, we actually use a ball that's not dissimilar to an American football. And we play the rules of kicking goals to each end of a football oval, and crazy fans. So very much like American football. We have great restaurants, cafes. We say we have the best coffee outside of Italy, and we have groundbreaking gastronomy in Melbourne as well. So that's really great, and it's great that we're a great destination for people to come here, but COVID has had an extraordinary effect on that. We established ourselves as one of the best Australian destinations with demand for our diverse tourism, and that stopped completely during COVID. The visitor economy is a significant contributor to our Victorian economy, and it grows really fast, where tourism was worth $23.4 billion to the economy, and it generated a total of 232,000 jobs. So in Victoria last year, it was $13.6 billion, so huge difference. And it's had a devastating impact on all of the different visitor attractions and employment for people, because a lot of those people were part-time employees as well. And so their consistency in employment was very much diminished. Total tourism expenditure suffered a net loss of $18 billion over the same 2-year period. And this unprecedented crisis set the industry back significantly, and hasn't been that low for 15 years. So a long way back for us to recover from there. So our borders have been closed since March 2020, and it did help stop the spread of COVID-19. So without the visitors, no one can come in unless they had an exemption. So we only had 33,200 international visitors come into Victoria in the year ending September 2021. It was a decline of 99%. International overnight spend in Victoria was just 129 million in the year ending September 2021, and it represented a substantial year-on-year decline of approximately 99%. So we're really being troubled by that reduction in tourism. The majority of international visitors were from New Zealand, and some movement through that we had a bubble create with New Zealand, but that stopped as well because there was a bit of backwards and forwards COVID infection. So it's set back the Melbourne CBD nearly 2 decades. More than 1 in 5 shops is empty. CBD office vacancy is approaching all-time high as companies struggle with return to work and trying to offload office space. Workers are gradually returning to work away from the comfort of working at home, and emerging trends of office workers preferring to commute only on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, which gives them a bookended long weekend every weekend. And residential occupancy rates for the CBD and Docklands are starting to recover after they collapsed totally in 2020. So we're going to see the international students now return because of our borders are open. But that hasn't actually started to happen as yet. But we're seeing shoppers returning to the city on weekends, although still not happening during the week, as we're seeing a gradual dribble of workers coming back into the CBD. The little coffee shops, the little outlets of food are starting to open up again, but it certainly COVID has had a devastating effect on our beautiful, beautiful Melbourne city. But apparently the federal government of Australia say that Melbourne is going to become the fastest growing city, And in 2030, we expect to overtake Sydney as being the most populated city in the world, city in Australia. And we say that the growth will take a while to heat up, but we're set for only a 3% growth in this year. But we say that we're going to have an increase of an increase up to 100,000 people a year. So that's a huge challenge for real estate and a huge challenge for property, for developers, for the government to be able to administer and manage the development of property. And because we're looking at all of that, we say that we're going to have 5.9 million people living in Melbourne in 2029, 2030, and that's not very far away. We currently have a shortage of, they say it's 144,000 units short of what we require to meet the population growth. So that's a challenge. It's a challenge for government. It's a challenge for the planning that goes into creating new villages and cities, and the time frame that's involved in making plans for new cities. And that's one of our things that we really need to concentrate, because that the affordability, the sustainability and the infrastructure that goes into it takes time to develop. So we've got to get our skates on. The REIA, and Michael probably will talk about this, they just released a document called Getting Real, and it produces the policy priorities for Australian real estate practice and for agents and agendas and their agents and their agencies. And it's the first edition, and it creates trusted real estate agents, we hope, fair real estate markets and prosperous real estate businesses. The REIA also produced a housing affordability report, and I hope I'm not cutting over you, Tim, or cutting over you, Michael, in what you're going to talk about, but it's a really highly respected and a very accurate recognition of what affordability looks like in Australia currently. But in Victoria at the moment, housing affordability has declined over the December 2022-21 quarter, and income required to meet loan payments is 37%. So when you add all the extra things into your life, it's not much left over for social activities or to put in the bank and save any money. So it's a really incredible number. Victoria recorded, which is the state that I live in, recorded its highest annual increase in average loan size by 22.6%. Now, that's all very well and good when we've currently got very low interest rates, but the Reserve Bank of Australia are anticipating an increase in interest rates. And so we're concerned about the equity that people have in their property and how they can survive the different economic pressures they have upon them. And we have seen the largest increase in first home buyers, and that's increased by 2.8%. So that's encouraging as well, that young people have been able to enter the marketplace, have removed themselves from that circle of rental accommodation and been able to get themselves into a first home. The median house price in Australia sits at $1.12 million with a quarterly price change of 4.2%. The median rent is $480 per week. That's Australian dollars. We have 80.1% auction clearance rates with an average of only 33 days on the market. So they're really lovely figures. That 80.1% dropped back over the weekend to 77, I think it was, which was the published rate. And in Victoria, selling property by auction is the most prominent way that property goes to the market. So, and I guess Doug will be talking about that because he's the master auctioneer. And our market remains strong. But we're not seeing the buyer frenzy that we had last year, where people were buying properties sight unseen. We had a 41,000 population removal from Victoria who went interstate, and we had about 25,000 people who shifted to a regional town. So the regional prices have been able to hold up, and people were buying things without seeing them. They look it up on the internet, put in an offer, and it might have been above the asking price to be able to secure that property, and people have left. So that puts pressure on those regional towns for the social, for health, for education, for the infrastructure to be able to service those communities. And So we're seeing a slight softening now with a federal budget and a federal election due for this year. We've got damage that we alluded to before from the floods in Queensland and in northern New South Wales, which have been really significant. Climate change is something that the naysayers in Australia have a lot of naysaying to do, and then we have the governments who have created a policy which we're not quite sure whether it's the right policy or not, and a position that probably needs a little bit of questioning following from these disasters. We have the war in the Ukraine, which is expected to significantly increase our inflation here, and particularly fuel and food. I just drive a Mazda car, and I put fuel in it yesterday. It cost me more than $100 to fill my car, and it was $2.29 or something a litre, which is extraordinary for us in terms of paying that sort of money for petrol. So there's pressure on the government to reduce the excise on the tax on the petrol, and we'll see what happens with that. It's a real election beauty to go to the market with something like that as a reduction in excise, but we'll see what happens with that. So we hope the impact of the borders opening in Australia will make a difference to the activities that we're doing. But there we are. That's what we're up to at the moment. So, yeah. So then you asked me about FIABC, and you mentioned FIABC in the introduction, and I've been extraordinarily fortunate to have been involved that since I was in my late teens. I did an exchange to California in the early 80s, and it was fantastic. And I learned about well, I already knew, I think, because I was born and raised a real estate agent, but I knew about diligence and attention to detail and all of those things. And I got all of that from spending time in California. And real estate in America is completely different to how real estate is in Australia. Your fees are much higher. We have the conflict here of being both the listing and the selling agent, and that can create conflicts in how we operate. But the International Real Estate Federation has been part of my life and the whole of my professional career, and doing the exchange, being involved on the various committees, and as I matured through my career. And the Federation, our mission is somewhat similar to yours, Sarah, and that it provides access and opportunity for real estate professionals interested in gaining knowledge, sharing information, and conducting international business with each other. And that has been great. The FIABC community, it gathers stakeholders in the real estate industry across 40 different professions in 49 different countries. It's a member of the International Ethical Standards Coalition, and has signed off on the 10 principles of the Global Compact, which include human rights, labour, environment, and anti-corruption, and money laundering and human trafficking, and all of those sort of things. The International Ethical Standards Coalition, it maintains and promotes a universal set of principles. Most of our organisations have a code of conduct and a set of standards that we ask our members to comply with. And this was created because of the global reach of real estate and our activities now. And it was created so that we had an overarching set of principles that organisations in third world countries with no understanding of those principles, they were able to have something to reach towards. And so they've published the standards, consists of high-level principles which are implemented by the coalition organisations, and they provide greater consistency to users of property professionals right throughout the world. And as it changes and we become increasingly international, so must our approach to developing and reinforcing professional ethics. Real estate is the method which countries develop a middle class. It's the way they develop riches, and it shapes and influences the world we live in. And shelter, I learned this when I travelled during my year of presidency, that shelter is shelter, and that shelter might be a corrugated iron piece of tin that you prop up with a couple of bricks and you sleep under it. It could be a nylon 4-bedroom kitchened little cottage that people have built under a non-completed bridge in India, and they protect that. And so part of the work that we do with the UN is about the protection of those property rights, and the development of some sort of title so that people are able to preserve their properties and protect them from taking over. One of the jobs that we did and we worked really strongly in was with the Global Housing Compact, which created a low interest loan for the working poor. And we went to various countries in the world and negotiated with governments and councils to get land that was unused. And then we developed some little cluster housing so that they were small, usually on 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, some cooking facilities, but it was embedded, the properties were built and then they were sold to the working poor. And we embedded the titles in the name of the female so that when that family dispute happens and when the female gets usually kicked out with the children and the husband takes on a new wife, they become homeless. And so with this project, that was prevented. And so we've been able to house mothers and families with this low interest loans for the working poor. And that's been a fantastic project financed by the Bank of America when the Bank of America was strong, and the World Bank. So that's been an extraordinary project, and it's ongoing, and it works in South Africa. It works in places like Puerto Rico, Venezuela, and places where there's significant problem with the homeless and the working poor. So that's been a really great thing. So that's what we've been up to with FIABC and the relationship with the United Nations in the development of the global housing and the development of the affordability project has been really quite significant, because all the way around the world there are examples of affordability where people have been building these different ways of accommodating people and without creating other dramas. And so we've got published 5 volumes regarding the city we need is affordable. They're all on the FIABC website, and you can see all the information about them. The REIA is going to be in the next version of that book with their work on affordability and the negotiations with the government. So we're extremely proud of that we've actually got an entry into the book. And there are other examples, which my newest nagging project has been to some of the developers here in Australia to get them interested in becoming part of that United Nations program through Habitat. So that's all I think I need to say. Australia, Victoria is a great state. We've suffered badly from COVID. We're recovering. People are starting to come back to work. And that means that we're recreating our social environment and that interaction with people, the networking, and an ability to actually see people face to face, and you just can't beat the whites of their eyes. That's fantastic. So thanks, Tash.
Well, it's wonderful to see the whites of your eyes again, Robin, and I look forward to seeing you again face to face soon. We already have people posting in the chat, hoping for a trade mission to Australia. So yeah, we put that together. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. The next, we've got Michael Wellsmore. Michael is also an NAR International Member Realtor. He's a licensed real estate agent and auctioneer with LJ Hooker in Belconnen, just a part of the Canberra area. Canberra is the capital of Australia, for those of you who don't know. It's in the state that they refer to as the Australian Capital Territory. And LJ Hooker, his particular office, they're the top auction sales office in Australia for LJ Hooker, and LJ Hooker themselves are one of Australia's largest real estate groups. So Michael is also an auctioneer. However, Doug is the one who's going to be telling us more about auctions during this panel here today. Michael started his real estate career in the family agency business in 1970. He grew up on a farm in the Snowy Mountains in New South Wales, the state where Tim currently is. That's hillbilly country, similar to the Appalachian Mountain area of the USA. However, they don't make any moonshine there. He worked as an agent, property consultant, and a project advisor, and he's been involved in thousands of residential and commercial property transactions, as have the two other realtor members of our panel. While he's a long-term Canberra resident, he has also lived and worked in New South Wales and Queensland, the state where Doug is in, for short periods as well. Michael has been a president of the Real Estate Institute of the Australian Capital Territory. He's also the REIA, or Real Estate Institute of Australia, representative in negotiations with the Australian federal government, similar to what CAR does with our legislative bodies here in California and what NAR does at the federal level. He has also been the REIA's presidential liaison to the National Association of Realtors and one of our international NAR directors. Michael's attended multiple international conferences in North America and Asia. He's delivered papers on the Australian property market and on agency practice. And he likes what he calls the game they play in heaven, which is known to the world as rugby union. However, do not confuse that with rugby league or Australian rules. So Michael is going to speak to us a little bit about the Canberra market. He's going to tell us what a typical real estate transaction is like in Oz, the timeline of the transfer from beginning to closing, the differences over there in how the seller and agent share marketing expenses versus how we typically do it here in the States, as well as what Robin alluded to, where very often in Australia, an agent represents the seller and not the buyer, and so then by default ends up in what we would call here in California a dual agency position, but it's a little bit different there. Also address the fact that they're about the local MLS. I won't give it all away. And a little bit about the relationship between the state associations and the National Association of Realtors here in the US. All of this is all about how you can build your business internationally and thus how you do referrals back and forth as well. So Michael, turning it over to you.
Thanks very much, Tasha. Tash, I'll cover a few things very quickly and then get into the topics you gave me. You've already alluded to the fact that a lot of people think that Sydney or Melbourne is the capital of Australia, but it's actually is Canberra. Canberra is about 150 miles, 240 kilometres west of Sydney, and it's in the Australian Capital Territory. Is an area that was carved out of New South Wales back just after Federation here in Australia to be where the nation's capital would be. And it was there was an international competition to do the original planning for Canberra. That was actually won by Walter Burley Griffin and his wife Marion. And they got underway with their planning that they'd done and was accepted in 1913. So it goes a long way back. The development of Canberra, I suppose, is the function is similar to Washington, and that the idea is to bring all of the government agencies to one point. Originally, the federal government was, when it was just after Federation, was in Melbourne, and then it was moved to Canberra when the new Parliament House, or what was called then the temporary Parliament House, and we now since 1988 have a new Parliament House. So it's the seat of federal government and has similarities to Washington in that way. The population is 465,000 people or thereabouts. We consist of three major universities, which is the ANU, Canberra University, and the Australian Defence Force Academy. There are a couple of other minor universities. And I mention all those because that feeds into sort of what it is that drives the city. We have in the ANU, there's 21,000 students and 16,000 in Australia at Canberra University. And then there's a couple of at the ADFA, which is, as I said, was the Australian Defence Force Academy. The population is mainly, the biggest employer in the city is the government, being both the local government and also the federal government. And there is then, that's without the Defence Force included, that's around 40%. So it is a major driver, and the importance of that is that it underpins the financial strength of the city. And that will feed into what some of the things that I've now mentioned to you. Now, that was alluded to when Robin was speaking, but we actually have the highest household incomes in the country, in Canberra. Part of that is because that we also have the most educated population in the country, with more degrees and all that in a household formation situation. The fact is that then the federal government also pays very well. So private sector also has to pay well. Other people bleed off and go and work for the government. So to give you a context of that, the household income in Canberra, as I said, is the highest in the country, and it's about $1,000 a week, Australian dollars, more than the household income of, say, Sydney, to give you it as an example. Robin also mentioned the amount of money that it takes to fund your mortgage payments. Again, this feeds back to the affordability. In the ACT, it's only 21%. And Robin was talking about 37% it was in Melbourne, 42% in Sydney, 30% I think in Brisbane. That shows you that people are not don't have to spend as much for housing in Canberra. So you'd think, where does that then run us out to, which were some of the points you wanted me to highlight, which was how does that feed into the real estate sector? So Sydney has a median house price. These are figures at the end of December, 1,601,000. Canberra is 1,178,000, and it is the second highest median house price in the country. So again, going back to the medium household incomes, that's not surprising to see. We've had a tremendous amount of growth in property in the last 12 months. The data comes out that we run out that year on year, it's about a 36% increase that we've had. So it's been quite dramatic. It's been really wild, and it has slowed a little bit, but it's still, there is still a major undersupply here in the ACT. And the market is still strong, not as strong as it was, and the prices are not jumping as much. And that can be reflected, I think, in the clearance rates that we've had with the auctions, and I'll just have a look at those for you. In the clearance rates that we've had were 92.5% last year. It's been 87.5% so far this year. And in our own office, I think we had a clearance rate of something like 96% for the full year on year last year, and I think it's about 98% at the present time. So it's a very popular way, and that demonstrates a very strong marketplace that we're working with. The typical transaction is that an agent will sign up a listing, as we would refer, I think you use the same term, for a property to sell it on behalf of the owner. They then will go into, there are various requirements in various states as to, before you can get all the contracts prepared, but the contracts are usually prepared by a solicitor. In most of the states, there is some variations, and Doug might touch on that with Queensland. In the ACT, you send all the documents off. There is then a whole bunch of other documentation that you have to get put in place before you're permitted to put the property on the marketplace. The time frame that the property will sell for, if you're running an auction campaign, that can run between 2 and 4 weeks. And then the settlement period will run between 30 days to 60 days is the normal sort of period. So that whole transaction period, usually you allow about a 3-month period from when the property is put on the market. In terms of the buyers and sellers, we act on behalf of the sellers. We obviously, there is a limited number of buyers agents. There are buyers agents, but it's not that people use. I've only had a couple this year. Most of them where you as the agent have got to work with the buyer, provide them with information, and the contract is then reviewed by their solicitor. So they engage a solicitor to review the contract, and then they can either come to the auction or they do just a private treaty sale. You asked about, Tash, about the local multi-listing services. They don't exist. We used to have them years ago, but they no longer exist. So people list the properties and sell the properties themselves. We don't. There's very little doing arrangements with other agencies. You do it maybe within your own office, but most of the transactions are the agent who is listing the property then is responsible for selling the property. The relationship between the estate associations and REIA, each state has its own association. And what they have is they have a relationship with the national body. I think that Queensland might not be in that group just at present, but Doug might touch on that. And then there is a relationship now between the Real Estate Institute of Australia's head office here in Canberra and NAR in Chicago. And I think they were all the topics that you asked me to cover, Tash. Was there any other? I mean, there's lots of stuff that I could talk about, but is that enough to cover for now?
Sorry. It would also, I think, be great, although often you represent both the seller and the buyer in Australia. Yep. It would be great if you could speak a little bit about how American agents can work with Australian agents, whether they be referrals to Oz or referrals from Oz, given the relationship that you had as the liaison between the Real Estate Institute of Australia and the National Association of Realtors, and of course, all of the trips that you've made over here for things like that.
Tasha, we'd actually, to be really clear, we represent the owner. It's a fiduciary obligation to represent the owner. The view that I take is that the buyers are the customers of the seller. So you try to do the best you can to make sure that their finances are right. They've gone and got their contracts reviewed. And so that in an auction process, when they turn up on the day of the auction, that they're ready to buy. And Doug will go through the steps of that and what the obligations are. But it's a very important step that you make sure that the buyer's ready to go on the day, because they're going to be committed to a deal on the day of the auction. So we assist the buyers, but they actually have to go off and get their own advice from their own lawyer or conveyancing firm to provide them with advice about the obligations of the contract. As I said, we just work with them where we can and provide them advice where that's necessary. Now, in terms of doing deals, you'd need to deal with I think with a member of the realtor or a CIPS member who understands about the system in America and the sharing of commissions. There probably wouldn't be, to be brutally frank, there's not a whole bunch of enthusiasm for sharing the commissions because our commission rates are a lot lower than they are in the US. Depending upon where you are, what state, they can be as low as 1% and probably get up to 2, maybe 2.5% of the transaction. And that is charged to the seller. In terms of I think that you asked me to address the costs for marketing. Most of the marketing costs are actually borne by the seller. So the seller pays for the marketing costs for their property. Numbers of people have an arrangement where we can delay the cost of that. In other words, that the owner doesn't have to make an outlay, that can be paid for at closing. And then there's a small fee that's charged for that. We use in our situation, we use a third party who underwrites that cost, and they then paid at the end. But the idea is to try not to have the seller with too much costs up front.
And so then if you had a client who wanted to leave ACT to come and work, did we just lose you?
There's someone trying to phone me on my phone, and
okay, all right.
Let me kill that, and we'll get that. There you go. I think
okay.
There we go. We declined that. We should jump back.
If you want to leave Canberra and either move to the States or wanted to invest in the States, how would you initiate a referral, given your knowledge of the relationship between the two countries?
Okay. In my situation, I've had that occur, and all I've done is found someone in a particular area, and I've just referred them to those people. You know, the trying to work out the commission sharing and all the rest of it, and do the transaction at such a arm's length is difficult. So I've had a situation where I've done that, and I've just referred them to someone just as a courtesy to the people, because normally if there's someone who's come to in that situation, they've been a past client, and so that's the way I do the transaction with them.
And how about vice versa? If an agent,
well, vice versa, I suppose we'd expect the same thing, because I think that's when I was saying I was being a little brutal, that I think that just to refer it. Now, look, if someone was to do something with me, yes, we would pay them some sort of referral fee. Given amount of money, how much that would be would depend upon how much money the people are spending. If they're spending $1 million plus, etc., and I have a good commission structure in place for the transactions that I'm doing, then I'd be happy to pay, you know, a referral fee of 1,000, maybe 2,000 Australian dollars, which is, of course, is do the conversion at 70 cents, you know, which is probably, you know, just under 1,000 up to $1,500.
Right.
Just as a
Someone
fee,
asked
because
in
we've
the
got to
chat what
manage
the
all the
exchange rate was. Right.
yeah, so we've got to do all the other work, you know, that comes, and the reality is that if I've got a property, then I've got so many other people at the present time wanting to buy the property, then, you know, that's a commercial decision. You're talking with a long term. You know, I've been doing this 40 odd years, so, you know, probably a little bit hard nosed in some of those things when it comes to the commission. But you know, I try and work in with people and have people have a good relationship with, as you know, when we've dealt with people in the past. So we'll come to an accommodation, I think, is the way to put it.
Exactly, and that just feeds right into what is very important for anyone on the call here who already works in global real estate or wants to focus more in that area, is being a part of networks like Theopsy, or having the CIPS designation, or having the direct personal relationships with people like Robin, Michael, or Doug, or agents in Sydney who Tim can connect you with. Having those personal relationships, then you know that your clients will be well taken care of, and you can work out accommodations, taking into consideration the differences of commission structures and the way business is done in the two countries. So that's something to keep in mind for everyone.
Probably just as in closing, Tasha, a thing that I've always looked at in terms of looking at where the market's at is looked at vacancy rates with with rental properties. So at the present time in the ACT, we actually have a real problem that we just do not have enough properties, and the vacancy rate is 0.5%. So, you know, it's normal.
Well,
you know, that's it's just people struggle to find somewhere to live and rent, and our rents actually are the highest in the country. So and then that feeds back to what I was saying before. We've got, of course, they're going to be the highest in the country. We've got $1,000 a week more where they have the highest household incomes in the country. So that's not, you know, and that's been building on why we've had this high pressure on there weren't enough property, so the market really jumped last year. So it's
both residential and commercial, Michael, as I know you.
Yeah, the commercial was down a little bit because, as Robin was talking about, a lot of people were working from home, but the federal government has now made a decision that, you know, people should now begin to go back to work. So the commercial rates are still very low. People have done very well with commercial real estate here in Canberra. Again, it's underwritten with the fact that we're a large office park for the federal government, and and not only that it's, if you think about a similar situation to Washington, where a lot of people are there to either lobby or to provide support to that infrastructure of the federal government being here. So that a lot of the city really relies on the fact that the federal government is located here and providing service and all the rest of it to government. So all this underpins, unless we're you know, seeing that the government's going to, you know, move off somewhere else, which there are some on the panel who might make comments like that, but I won't mention who. But you know, I would suggest that the Canberra's not going anywhere, and its purpose is not going anywhere.
Well, thank you very much, Michael. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Last, just general knowledge for American realtors who are so used to working with the MLS and our agency cooperation. Are you aware of any states in Australia that do have a local cooperation between agents, something similar to our MLS system here? I know it's something that you've studied while you were over here as well.
Yeah, no, there's nothing. We used to have it, Tasha, but it is now. I'm not aware of there being anything. It's non-existent. The multiple listing services. There might be within franchises, they might have some arrangements like that, But generally, it's not simply that there is so much activity in the particular area where you are, the city that you might be in. They do have some sort of referral arrangements back and forth within that, but again, it's not for a large amount of the commission. And in those situations, I've done the same as I do to overseas, just send people to someone that I have in the hooker network somewhere else in the country.
Right. Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Appreciate the general background.
Thanks very much, Tashia.
As I mentioned earlier, if anyone has questions, do post them in the chat, because we will have Q&A for all of our panelists after they've each given their presentation, since they're each have pre-agreed to cover a variety of topics related to real estate in Australia. So feel free to post your questions in the chat. Thank you so much, Michael. So next up, we are going to move up the coast. Not that Canberra is on the coast, but a little bit further north. So Michael was in Canberra, in the capital of Australia. Robin was in Melbourne. And going up, we are going to go to Queensland, to a town named Toowong. It's very fun in Australia, all of the very silly, as I call them, Aboriginal names of various towns. And Toowong is just outside of Brisbane, where Doug Disher now is, after skiing in Aspen and passing through LAX just a couple of weeks ago. He likes to avoid floods in his own state and various different hazards or natural disasters in his state, and go skiing in the States. So Doug Disher is also an international member of NAR, so a realtor. He also holds the CIPS designation, and he is the CEO of Doug Disher Real Estate in Toowong, outside of Brisbane, in Queensland. Doug began his real estate career in 1985 at the Sydney market. He came to Brisbane in 1987. He is also a licensed auctioneer and a real estate agent. He gained both of these licenses, as well as the certificate of real estate practices, in 1989. All of the people that we're speaking with today have been in the business quite a while. He is an accredited auctioneer of the Auction School of Victoria, and has been awarded the Auctioneer of Excellence Award that is held by only 13 other auctioneers throughout all of Australia. And he also was a real estate salesperson of the year in the Real Estate Institute of Queensland, the state institute in Queensland. Doug is also, as I alluded, a keen downhill skier. He flies through LAX in order to collaborate with yours truly, his favorite California colleague, and is a keen cyclist and tries as often as possible to follow along the Tour de France route, literally following along the Tour de France route. So Doug's going to speak to us a little bit about the Brisbane market, and he is also going to explain the auction process and where and when this is commonly used in Australia. This is something that Doug and I were actually speaking about a couple of weeks ago here in Redondo Beach, is given how crazy all of our markets are here in the US, with similar shortages of inventory, as Robin and Michael have already alluded to in Australia. Why aren't we doing more auctions here? The reality is, with all of our multiple offer situations and with how few properties there are, an auction might actually be a better process for us to think about adopting on a more frequent basis here in California. So Doug's going to enlighten us a bit about that as well. So turning it over to you, Dougie.
Thanks, Tasha. Just unmuting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hi. So just to clarify, Toowong's actually part of Brisbane. It's about 4 kilometres from the CBD. It's on the river. Brisbane itself is a
I'm sorry, Doug,
subtropical.
can you explain what CBD is? I know for you and Robin and
Sorry.
everyone else down there,
Yes,
it's a very common
of course.
term, but most people aren't.
Downtown, is that it?
familiar. Thank you.
So we're about 4 kilometres, about 3 miles from downtown Brisbane. So we're really part of the city, or inner city. We're on the river, a beautiful Brisbane river that flooded a few weeks ago. Every time I go to Aspen, Brisbane floods. There you go. Brisbane's about 2.5 million people, so it's quite a large city, but it's actually really a big country town. You can't go anywhere without running into people you know, or the airport especially. There are always people you run into. It's just a lovely place. It's subtropical. It's lat 27, which is the same as Buenos Aires in Argentina. So very, very great. It's great for outdoor activity. I can just about ride my bike every day of the year. You know, so it's a wonderful place to live. Lovely people. The further north you go, the warmer it gets, the more friendly the people are. I'm not saying anything about Melbourne or Sydney here, but we really are a friendly bunch. We are host to the 2032 Olympics. So come and, if you don't come and see us before then, Tasha and everybody else, come along in 2032 and have a ball. So what can I tell you? One of the most important things we haven't covered yet is, can you buy real estate in Australia? So typically you've got to be a resident to be able to buy real estate, residential real estate. However, non-residents can purchase vacant land, subject to some conditions. They can also buy new properties, but they will need prior approval from the FIRB, which is the Foreign Investment Review Board. Now, be very, very careful. If you're putting a client into Australian real estate, it's a criminal offence not to get FIRB approval before you buy. And apart from the criminal offence part, which is, what do you call that over there? It's not a misdemeanor, a felony. Yeah. So pretty serious stuff if you don't do it right. But if you get approval, you're okay. If you don't, you can not only go to prison, which is unlikely, but it's in the statute, but you can also lose your deposit and the property. So be very, very careful. That's a very, very important factor. So before you do anything, check that out. Apart from that, we're home to the Gold Coast, which is a little bit like California. It's beach and everything else. So again, it's a really, really pleasant place to live. Now, we talked earlier on about timelines and how you buy and sell real estate in Australia. Well, Brisbane's a little bit different because the agent here prepares the contract. So we act as the lawyer, not literally, but we do a lot of the things that the lawyers would normally do. And the first time that, is anyone getting an echo? Or is it just me?
Very little
Can you
bit.
hear me okay? Okay.
We can hear you
So-
okay. There's just a little bit of an
Great.
echo.
So we prepare the contracts, we get contracts signed, and the first time the lawyers generally get involved is when we send them the finished product. So their role then is just simply to do the conveyance from one party to the other. Typically, it's a 30-day contract. Typically, it's a conditional contract when it's a normal sale, so subject to finance, which these days is about 21 days because the banks are very slow. They've let a lot of people go, so and they're a little bit lazy. So it takes a bit longer, so 21 days for finance. Building and pest inspection is pretty standard as well now, which is you can do within 4 or 5 days. And there's also a cooling off period. That means the buyer can cancel the contract within 5 working days. Now, these are all little technicalities, but I'm just mentioning that because it's not as straightforward as most people would think. And that's why it's really, really important that you give me a call so I can help you with the whole thing. But seriously, you know, do your homework, make sure you get everything right, because it can be devastating if a person misses out on a property or even worse, loses their deposit. So just be aware of that. So I'm going to talk a little bit about auction. Auction really only took off in Brisbane in the mid 80s when I got up there, and it's not because of me, although I did my best to promote auction coming from Sydney, where auction, like Melbourne, was far more prevalent. Our current clearance rates are less than 70% in Brisbane, and that's mainly because a lot of people don't understand the process and they just think if they put an auction sign up, it's going to do everything by itself. And there's a lot of work involved. The main advantages of an auction for the seller is that, you know, I mentioned earlier on about the conditions, the finance, the building and pest, the cooling off. Well, with Sorry, I'm just getting over a bit of a cold and I'm a little bit croaky. Bear with me. So it's a cash unconditional sale. That means when the hammer falls, the sale is made and there is no backing out. It allows the seller to have a pretty quick sale, usually a 4-week campaign. We only sell about 10% of our auctions before auction day if there's good demand, if there's going to be a lot of competition. There's also potential for a premium, so a big price in the right market. And we're in that market at the moment. We're getting, you know, properties that should be selling for $1 million, we're getting 1.3, 1.4 million for. Worst case scenario, they're going to get market value in a short period of time with an unconditional contract. So it's a real win-win for the seller. And it also drives lots of buyers to the property. So you get a range, because there's no price on the auction, you know, if the property's worth $1 million, you're getting people from 800,000 to 1.4 going through. So you're getting a much larger section of the market, which then generates your competition. And it also puts in a sense of urgency into the whole thing. So from the buyer's point of view, you might say, well, what's in it for the buyer? Well, the great thing about an auction is it's a level playing field. Buyers can see each other, they can see who's bidding. It's rather than the agent saying, hey, I've got an offer of this, you know, do you want to get more? There's no smokes and mirrors, no smoke and mirrors involved in that. Also, once the hammer falls, it's their property. They know they've got it. And we usually crack a bottle of Moet and have some champagne and tell each other lies. At worst, if they've bought the property, they've only paid $1,000 over market, because the next highest bidder would have paid $1,000 less. So there's confidence in that as well. And also, it's a regulated process in Queensland. Everyone has to be registered, and that registration book is available to government, to Office of Fair Trading inspectors who do come around and look. So there's none of this, you know, a bidding off a tree or the dog or whatever else. Plus, from the buyer's point of view, there is the chance of a bargain, because everybody knows that when someone's going to auction, they're serious about selling, and that's a key issue. So when that happens, there is a chance they might get it for less than they thought it was worth. It might still be more than the owner thought it was worth, but they're happy. And lastly, I guess, advantages to the agent, because there's got to be something in it for us, hasn't there? You know, it's not just about everybody else, it's about us a little bit too. So it's a fast-track sale with a high probability of success. There's no waiting for finance and building inspection clauses, which keeps you awake at night when it's a big sale. High exposure to the market, especially, and we only do on-site auctions. We don't do in-room auctions. I'm not saying in-room auctions are a bad thing, but we like to do them on site. We get to meet the neighbours. We have a charity auction before each auction, benefiting. This weekend we've got one for the Stroke Foundation. We're doing one for the flood relief. So, you know, we throw in about $200-300 worth of stuff, and we typically get between $400 and $600 from the public before the auction starts. So everybody gets a little bit relaxed about it. Large number of buyers and potential sellers that come into contact with us through the auction process, which you don't get if you just got, you know, if you sell it on day one to the first person that comes through, you've had no exposure. Property's had no exposure. And it's a very clear path to follow, using systems to ensure that the campaign maximizes the outcome for the seller. So if you're running 3 or 4 auctions, you are flat chat. You don't have time for anything else. You know what you're doing every day. These are the phone calls. These are the actions I've got to take. These are the ads I've got to place. These are repeat phone calls I've got to make. So your day's full, and it's a wonderful feeling when your day and your week and your month is planned, and you know that you've got, in our case, about like with Michael, about a 92-93% success rate for our own auctions. But we do pick and choose. We don't take you know, just any property. So that's the sort of, in a nutshell, the auction process. A lot of agents I've spoken to in the States think it's just a fire sale thing. You only do it if you're over a barrel. Well, think about that for a moment. What happens with those fire sale auctions is you get a lot of people turning up, don't you? Because they all think it's going to go for nothing. And if you use the same principle for your normal auctions, it may take a bit of time to get traction. You might have to work it for a year or two in your particular area. But I promise you this, it will pay huge dividends and it'll give you more exposure than you could ever imagine. So it's just to me, it's the only real way of selling real estate. So I've been doing it for 30 odd years and I just love it. So that's basically the auction process. We get all our sellers to pay the advertising up front. That's a sign for me that they're committed to the process. We don't, if they don't want to pay for the auction, I'm not interested. And our typical budgets are between $3,000 and $10,000 for each property, Aussie dollars, that is. So, it's a sizable budget. We can do it for less, but we always maintain that you've got to spend the money to get the result. And typically we feel that the price we get at auction pays not only for the advertising, but most of the time for our fee as well. We charge 3%, by the way, plus tax. So 3.3% is our fee. We're happy to conjunct, not on auctions, because we know that's Michael said, when you've got a dead cert, it's why would you?
Doug, can you explain conjunct, please?
Conjunct is where another agent gets part of your fee, where they want to introduce
Call it
a buyer.
agent cooperation here, guys.
Yeah. But look, that being said, if any of you have got people who want to buy over here, more than happy to look after them. We'll pay a 20% fee for CIPS or NAR, just as a gesture of goodwill. And of course, if you've got anyone over there who wants to buy and they've got a property in Brisbane or anywhere else, that's music to our ears, and we'll pay 20% as well for that. So we're keen to do business.
And we also were discussing when you were over here a couple of weeks ago, the difference between those auctions that are done here and those auctions there with regards to buyer's premiums. Can you address that question? You already mentioned that the commission typically is 3.3% to include the tax that has to be paid. Can you address whether there is or is not a buyer's premium?
No buyer's premium. Whatever the price is that the property sells for, is what the buyer pays. But I did take note of the buyer's premium, and I've been thinking about that a bit. But I think that would probably be illegal. It is done in some markets in Asia where sometimes we get other agents who we know are getting paid by the buyer as well. But it's pretty strict over here. You are working for the seller, and you have to do everything, to make sure that that's how it's done. And the buyers here know that, even though you're working with the buyers at the same time. And we often say to them now, look, if you're making an offer, you do realize that we're working for the seller. So whatever you tell us, if you tell us you've got another $10,000, but you don't want to put it forward, we're going to tell the seller that. So, we make it very clear, and people understand that. And it's not really that much of a juggling act, as long as you stay on the straight and narrow, and just tell the truth all the time. There are no degrees of truth. It's absolute. So you've got to stick to that. And if you do that, then you don't have any problems.
And two other quick comparisons with our market or details that would be helpful to elaborate on is inspections and sharing of disclosures, et cetera, information, as well as how an auction is marketed, given that you don't have the MLS.
So the disclosures, it's not compulsory here, but we've been doing it for about 15 years. We provide a building report and a pest report for our properties. The seller pays for those. It's about $500, and they're pretty happy to do that. And what happens then is if there are things there that they can fix before it goes to market, then they fix them, or if not, we disclose them. So it's either disclosure or fixing. And if they don't fix them, then we make it clear that that has to be reflected in the reserve price, which is what determines the minimum price that the seller will sell at. In terms of no MLS marketing, well, we predominantly use the internet. We have two main portals here, and one is very strong and generally pretty unpopular with the agents because they charge like a wounded bull, as they say. But we don't have much choice. And the other one's a smaller one that's more prevalent in the southern states. They're a bit more reasonable, but they also don't get us the results that the larger one does. So through the portals is where we get most of our new traffic. We've got a database of 46,000 at the moment. We market very aggressively to that. And when I say aggressively, I don't mean that we spam them, but we do make sure that it goes to the right people at the right time. And we do get a lot of results from that. We let them know before it actually hits the portals, so they get a bit of a leg up before the thing starts. With auction, obviously, they've still got to wait until auction day typically to buy it. We just actively discourage prior offers unless they're ridiculously high. And that can be another, as I said, another juggling act. There's a lot more to auction than meets the eye, but the more you do it, the more comfortable you get with it, the easier it becomes, and the better the results.
And then two other quick distinctions here. When someone buys an auction at auction, do they have any type of an inspection period, or is it an as-is purchase? And is there a deposit, and what is that percentage typically that is required? Again, trying to compare it a little bit with the rare auctions that happen here for people.
Yeah, sure. So no, there are no inspections. That's it. Once the hammer falls, it's sold. Actually, the contract legally is formed when the hammer falls. So I can actually, as auctioneer, sign for the buyer and the seller. So if the buyer decides to run down the street, try and get away, I can sign for them because we've pre-registered. It hasn't happened yet. Touch wood. But I can actually sign for them, and because we've got pre-registration, we've got their details, we've got their driver's license number, we've got their signature on the bidding. So it would be very, look, in the thousands of auctions I've done, I've only ever had one person pretend that they couldn't speak English at the point of moment of truth, and then when I pointed to our video camera that we have discreetly on all our auctions, the language came back miraculously, and they signed the contract. So, so actually, that's a good point. I would recommend when you're doing auctions, record them. Make sure you've got them on video. So no, it is cash now. As far as deposits concerned, most auctions are a 10% deposit on the fall of the hammer. We do it slightly differently. We allow 5 to 10% within 3 days. And the reason we do that is because sometimes people turn up on a Saturday morning for an auction that they hadn't intended to buy. They hadn't made provision for a 10% or even a 5% deposit, and then they feel they can't bid because they'd have to present the deposit straight away. So by giving them the extra 3 days, and normally they pay it the same day anyway, but by giving them that, we have had people who have bid who wouldn't have bid otherwise. And that's, and there've been no negative outcomes on that at all, because they're a major breach of contract if they don't pay the deposit. So they can be sued within an inch of their life. So yeah, not that we do.
Terrific. Thank you so much. And we're going to switch over to Sydney market, but before we do, can you give us just a rough idea of median price in Brisbane and appreciation in Brisbane? Just real quick rough number before we switch to Sydney.
Yeah, look, we've had a staggering over 30% in the past year. Median price is about 790,000, which is a bit lower than the other states. But we've also had a good record median for units, almost 420,000. 2% quarterly rise and 3.5 annually. So it's been pretty good, and we are actually the fastest. I didn't mention that before. We've got the highest growth rate of any state in Australia. in terms of population. It's all the people from Sydney and Melbourne coming up to Brisbane.
Having visited Sydney, I know that there are wonderful things to see in Sydney and New South Wales as well. But I do look forward to visiting Brisbane too, Doug. Wonderful. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. We're going to switch over now to Tim McKibbin, my friend in Sydney, which is in the state of New South Wales. Tim is the only person on our panel who is not a realtor. He is, in fact, the CEO of the Real Estate Institute of New South Wales. So Tim, if you like, is the Joel Singer of New South Wales, to kind of have our Californians understand his role. And like Joel, Tim has been there for a long time. So Tim's a wonderful guy down there in Sydney. Tim has been at the heart of the Real Estate Institute of New South Wales, like I mentioned, quite a while, for the last 17 years. First, he was their legal counsel, and then in 2008, he became their CEO. Although he left school at 15 to become an electrician, so he's great to have around the house, he worked in the mines as an electrician at Broken Hill. Tim then moved on and has a law degree, an accountancy degree, and an extensive professional background in law and accountancy practice under his belt. Before he went to Real Estate Institute of New South Wales. He's a down-to-earth country boy at heart. Tim still couples business suits with R.M. Williams boots. You'll tell us what R.M. Williams boots are, Tim. And on occasions, an Akubra hat, is that right?
Akubra, yeah.
Akubra, okay. He's regularly interviewed by the media on property market issues and trends. He currently sits on the NCAT Consultative Forum and the New South Wales Real Estate Reference Group, and he's a member of the Property Law Committee of the Law Society of New South Wales. He's straight talking, hardworking, and passionate about property. Tim has a personal mission to elevate the community's attitude towards real estate agents and their profession. So he's definitely on our side, guys. And he describes the industry as my work, my hobby, and my obsession. Knowing Tim's wife personally as well, Jody, who is a commercial real estate attorney and wonderful woman, it is his work, his hobby, and his obsession in their household. Tim wants to see our industry have a greater say in its destiny. He would like to, contrary to today's example, expand the services and control more steps in a property transaction using technology, even if he doesn't use it as much himself. He wants to transform the industry from a pure service provider to a greater advisory role and financial advisor for property. So definitely a great, great advocate for real estate agents, for New South Wales, and for the industry at large. So Tim is going to speak to us a little bit about what's going on with the market in Sydney, why it's so expensive in that town. When I took him and Jody on a tour around the South Bay Beach cities and markets here, there was a lot of comparison between the two markets, even though they actually saw our crazy market as a bargain. Talk a little bit about taxes, the government's solutions to affordability, something that also is near and dear to Robin's heart, as we heard, and Real Estate Institute of New South Wales status vis-a-vis the Real Estate Institute of Australia, and how the state real estate institutes work in Australia compared to the National Association of Realtors here in our state and local associations. And if someone wanted to do referrals between NAR and agents and agents in Tim's state, and a little bit about how foreigners can purchase and reside in Australia and the benefits that may be given to them. Doug touched a little bit on this, as did Michael a little, any restrictions that might be imposed. So turning it over to you, Tim, and then as soon as Tim is done, we're going to open it up to the Q&A.
Thanks, Tasha. It looks like my marketing department's gotten hold of my CV, so I'll have to go back and have a look at that. In relation to RMs, they're simply shoes. So, and people sometimes say that people who wear them aren't real bright because there's no shoelaces on them. So you just pull them on. Whether that be the case or not, I don't know. going last means that everybody else before me has pretty much covered everything and then some. So I've got a bit of a challenge in front of me to make this interesting. But if we talk about Sydney, my personal view is that Sydney's one of the most beautiful cities in the world. It has a parallel with, I think at least with San Francisco, where you have the center of San Francisco and its world is the Bay, and we have something similar. Our whole focus is around the harbour, and we have the Harbour Bridge, and which incidentally is turning 90, I think, in a few days' time. So an incredible structure even now, but in its day, something very special. So I remember reading somewhere that there was a list of cities that you must see. I think it was London, Rome, New York, Sydney, and I think there was a couple of others. Hong Kong, I think, was another one at one stage. But nonetheless, I think Sydney is a wonderful place to live. Unfortunately, though, it's a very expensive place to live, and we might get into that in a second. So I've got a secret hand movement here.
Tim, you just muted yourself by mistake.
No,
Okay, there we go. Now you're back.
Okay, yeah, I'm not quite sure how I do that, but anyway. So I have this hand signal for my help who in the US, who's going to change my slides for me. Yeah, well done. So
thanks, Ashley.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that. So this is backs up what some of the folks were saying ahead of me, and Doug and Michael and Robin. You can see here the percentage that is required to service the average mortgage. Now our mortgages are huge, and that is a real problem. Now I look at Sydney there at, or New South Wales there at 46.5%. When I started to do the research on that, that really surprised me, because I didn't believe that a bank would let you get to that point, but clearly they have, and as you can see there, that it is quite expensive. Michael pointed out, and the numbers certainly back it up, that the ACT salary, the family income, the combined family income there is greater than, as you can see, in Sydney, but the cost of a property in Sydney is greater than that. So it's a very, very expensive place to live, and it really is a challenge trying to find affordable housing there. In the complex where I live, I'm in a we call them townhouses. I'm not quite sure what the terminology in the US is.
Yes, it would be a townhome, Tim.
Okay, so it's and it's not huge. And the one in the complex here that sold on Saturday for $2,165,000. Now, I just find that breathtaking. It's not even a freestanding home. I think, Tashia, you've stayed with me, I think?
I did.
Yeah, so I'm sure that you would struggle with that number.
I love the neighborhood, but wow.
Yeah. So just ridiculous sums of money being paid. We might move to the next slide, please. Again, it's probably self-explanatory, but as you can see, the annual increase in the value of the properties in Sydney, and now we've led the way here, but the annual increase was 25%. Well, that, in fact, that doesn't say that, but many of the other commentators had. So one of the things that was being reported to try and make the point about how quickly the price was rising here in Sydney was that one of the articles I read said it was going up $1,000 a day. So yeah,
Wow.
so it's an interesting way to depict it. $1,000 a day. I put out a press release just before Christmas, and was picked up quite widely for its entertainment value. But I said my house made more money this year than I did, which was to highlight the point of how much what the sort of rises we were seeing. At one time, I looked at the most unaffordable places in the world, and at that time, it was Vancouver, Hong Kong, and then Sydney. Now, as I understand it, that's moved on, and now it's Sydney, Australia, which, as you can see, Sydney is the standout, unfortunately. Turkey, the Czech Republic, and New Zealand. So housing here is extremely expensive. So we might see our next slide. Yeah, Doug has done a great job of talking about auctions, but here in Sydney we had a 75% clearance rate on Saturday, but the number of properties coming to auction has gone up 26%. And they are recording very good sales. So it's very, very strong market. So it went up 26% from this time last year. And this time last year, again, it was very strong as compared to the previous year. But last year we were looking at around about 83% clearance rate, I think I looked at. So yes, it's come off to 75%, but having said that, we've got 26% more property. And the median house price, and that goes right across Sydney, the median house price is $1,168,000. I've got 3 children, and they have all got university qualifications, all have jobs, etc. Good paying jobs. I don't know, frankly, how they're going to be able to buy a home. I don't know where, in some respects, the money is coming from when I see people at auctions and buying property. Like Doug, I really like auctions. It's a very transparent way to buy property. You know everybody in the room that, and you can watch and see people's faces, and you make decisions around that. I like it. I'm looking at a property now, and by way of private treaty, and the whole thing is very opaque. So I would prefer to buy by way of auction. What you will find, though, is that agents will take properties to auction when the competition is strong. But when you have a limited number of people that are interested in the property, then they tend to do a private treaty negotiation for that reason, that you don't want to disclose to the purchaser that there isn't a great deal of interest in that particular property. So might move on, please. So housing affordability, not surprisingly, if the market went up 25%, that housing affordability declined quite sharply. We've got home loans of over $1 million is very common, over $1 million. Now, some of the property commentators in the beginning of the pandemic rushed out to the media and said that the market would collapse by 30%. It would, there'd be this massive correction, pretty much all of them. But what happened is it went up 25%. So we have a television program here called Media Watch. And Media Watch keeps an eye, as the name would suggest, on comments in the media, things that happen in the media. So the compere of this particular program ran all of these comments, and which was at that stage 12 months earlier, and then ran all the comments that were put out at the beginning of this year. So the very same people that said it was going to drop by 30% were then predicting it would go up by 30%, which I found quite interesting. What I've decided to do is to keep a file now of all of the crazy predictions that these folks come out with. We've got a person from our bank over here, a major bank, the Commonwealth Bank, who said that the market's going to collapse by 10% this year. So I've got that in my file, and if it doesn't, I'll remind him of it in December. But when the pandemic hit, and I missed this, I have to say I missed it. My comment about the market was that it would freeze. I thought that the only sales that you would see would be distressed sales. I didn't see the demand that happened. I just didn't see it coming. So my view at that time was it would just, as I said, would just freeze. One of the reasons that the property commentator said that the market would cool by the 30% was because our immigration ceased, and that was what Robin said earlier. We just shut our doors to the world. And that's true. And we take in about 150,000 immigrants a year. And as Robin also said, you want to talk about shelter, and she's right. There's three things that we need. We need food, water, and shelter. And so if you're coming into Australia, those 150,000 people need somewhere to live. But what I didn't see, and I think was missed by everybody, we ended up having about 500,000 expats come back into Australia that were working around the world and found themselves in situations where they felt themselves to be at greater risk of the pandemic in those countries, and they came back to Australia. So we had about 500,000 of them over about 18 months. Now, not surprisingly, 500,000 as opposed to 150,000, that caused a problem in the market. There's all kinds of discussions that go on about the problem with affordability in Australia, and in particular in Sydney. And you don't need to spend a lot of time listening to news reports before that particular topic comes up. The reality of it is, though, it is really, really simple in relation to the problem. The problem is really simple, and the problem is we don't have enough. It is supply and demand. It's economics 101. It's that simple. If we were to bring thousands of more properties into the market, the price would go down. But when you listen to government and a variety of other people in this space, there is all this smoke that goes around it, trying to complicate the issue, and it is not complex. So the next dot point, FHB, stands for first home buyers, and I've forgotten what the last dot point was on the previous slide. Oh, government support. So this was a little bit by way of some entertainment. The government here in New South Wales decided that what they would do is that they would buy a house with you. So they said, well, you buy 75% of it and we will buy 25% of it. And that was, I think, a knee-jerk reaction and in fact, it came out on exactly the same day as they had an election in New South Wales, what we call a by-election, which was a couple of people in particular electorates resigned, and we needed some replacements, and they brought this particular concept out whereby they were going to buy the property with you. Now, that to me is paramount to an admission that government is unable to solve the affordability problem. In Sydney, we are absolutely addicted to property and property conversations. You cannot get into a cab, get your hair cut, have people around as a dinner party without talking about property. We love it. It's an obsession. When I get a cab ride somewhere, I don't tell people what I do for a living, because I'm fearful that they would drive me around and around the block. But anyway, that's the problem with affordability, and frankly, that's the solution. Might have our next slide. I should also say about affordability that whilst government says we're working on it, what is the problem, all the rest of it, in New South Wales, the taxes and charges that are levied by all three levels of government add over 40% to the cost of new property. So when we have a new build, 40% of what you pay is taxes and charges in a non-transparent environment. So I've always thought that if you wanted to look at affordability, that 40% might be a nice place to start. Next slide, please. And again, as Robin pointed out, and Doug also, I think this whole working from home learnings that we had during COVID. So once we had discovered that we could work from home, then the question arose is, where do I want home to be? And a lot of people decided that home would be out in the regional areas, and we call them tree change or sea change. I'm not sure if you use those expressions, but to be able to go and find a property out in a regional area and work from there. Now, if you were fortunate enough to be able to do that, and you only had to commute to the office, say, 1 day a week, then you might be prepared to go out 150 kilometres or so out of the city, and you would be prepared to do the commute, 1 day a week, 1 day a fortnight. If you were a little more wealthy, you might go further afield and buy a property in a location which is even better than what would be offered within the 150 kilometre arc that I mentioned. And then you might commute by way of aircraft into the city, once a week or once a fortnight or something like that. Now, in one particular location, well north of Sydney, a place called Byron Bay, the median house price went up 37% in the year. And that was because people started to move into that area en masse. It has also caused a problem with stock, with available property. Now, what's happened is people in Sydney have said, I think I can make this work. I think that I can move to Byron Bay and I'll be able to work there, commute when I have to into Sydney. I think it'll work. Now, some people have been courageous enough to go and buy a property, sometimes without seeing it, just off the web. Others have been a little more cautious, and they've gone into that area and decided that they will rent a property to test drive their theory about being able to work there. Now, both of those people would typically not have sold their property in Sydney. So now they're consuming two properties, one in Sydney and one in a regional area. Can we just go back to the previous slide, please? So the other thing that is causing problems particularly in those areas is the social impact. So we have people who are not remunerated as others. So people in our industry, for example, enjoy a certain income. Those who are fortunate, work hard in the industry, do enjoy a good income. But people who work in in hotels, pubs, as we call them, bars, I think you have to call them. People work there, restaurants, tourism, and a variety of other employment. They are not as well remunerated. So when it came to competition for a property to rent, these people were then squeezed out of that local economy. They could no longer live there. So we ended up with this rather odd circumstance where the money had moved into the likes of Byron Bay, but when you went to the restaurant, you found that there was no one there to serve you because those people who would have served you couldn't afford to live in the area. So that had a social impact. And again, it goes back to what Robin said, that with property, with shelter, as we said that you must have, if you can't have it in a location, you need to get it in another location. So these people were moved out. So we see this marriage between property and people's lives. There's quite often you'll hear the expression from the cradle to the grave with property. In relation to commercial and retail property in the CBD, this is going to be a very interesting space to watch over the next 12 months, because we can now work from home, and I'm in my lounge room now, which is my lounge room, my office, and my studio when I do any media. So it's now become a very, very versatile space. But people are not going into the city as much as they've done previously. That's just not happening. So the commercial property where you would have had the offices, they are under some pressure now for commercial space. So people are saying, I don't need that amount of space. So I'm going into the office 3 days a week. But a lot of people who would have gone into the office 5 days a week aren't doing that anymore. So employers, business owners are saying, well, instead of having office space to accommodate all of my team, if I structure this properly, I can have office space that only requires 60% of my team, and everybody will hot desk. And that's how that'll happen. The New South Wales government has told all government employees that they must come back to work in the city full time. And the reason they're doing that is because of the retail properties in the city. So you've got somebody who is dependent on selling lunches and cups of coffee and all these sorts of things, and there's nobody in the city. So that is going to be a very interesting space to watch. Warehouse and industrial property is currently favoured. That is doing very well in the market now. Things like Amazon and the like during COVID did very well, and as a consequence of that, you need a warehouse to be bringing the stuff through there. So that did very very well. Might move on, please. So I heard that, I'm not sure whether it was Robin or Doug or Michael actually said that they had a lot of interest coming in from Europe and the States in relation to purchasing property. Our experience is a lot of the money's coming out of China. Now, the Chinese government's made that a lot more difficult in the last 5 years or so for people to get money out, but there is a lot of syndicated money still coming out of China. Also, we saw when Hong Kong went through its turmoil, a lot of money coming out of Hong Kong, and that had an impact. But obviously, all of that had gone away in the last 2 years or so. So it will be interesting to see if there is money coming back out of China and some other locations, and what impact that will have on the Australian market. It can't be good. We just don't have enough property here, and if people start buying it and moving in, it's going to be a real challenge. I remember in another press release we put out, one of my people came up with the idea, and Robin reminded me when she said that we had the toilet paper wars. So people were actually getting into punch-ups in our supermarkets because they were fighting over toilet paper. They had a fear that there wouldn't be enough. Now, whilst that was alarming and, dare I say, somewhat entertaining, that what it pointed out was the following day that that particular supermarket was able to get another supply of toilet paper, bring it in, put it on the shelf, and quench the demand, if you will. But with property, you've got an 18-month, 2-year process to get property to the market. So you can't go and drag it in from the warehouse. Our planning system is designed, in my humble opinion, to make you give up. I'm doing renovations to the REI house where our office is located, and I've got more consultants than I can poke a stick at. In fact, I've got a consultant that manages the other consultants. Now, finally, we managed to get the approval through our local council that said, okay, you can go and build what you want to build. Now, this is a renovation, by the way, so nothing external. It's all internal works, and we were on that journey for 18 months to get that approval. The builders are going to take about 4 months to do their bit. So that's just crazy in my view. So one of the earlier slides there talked about how we would work together. I was involved in trying to put a transaction together for somebody. I think they were in California, and they had somebody that wanted to buy a property in on what I call the Central Coast, which is about an hour and a half north of Sydney. And it fell over, the deal fell over because of the concern about commissions. And the concern was that there just wasn't enough money in it. Sorry, I should say the concern wasn't there wasn't a big enough percentage in it. So, we would charge somewhere between 1 to 2.5%, this sort of thing. I don't really think that we should be focusing on the percentage. I appreciate in the States that you're getting 6%, and which is shared between the buyer's agent and the listing agent. But I don't think that that's relevant. What I think is relevant is how much money is in there. Now, I'd rather have 2% of $1 million than 10% of $100. So I don't think the percentage is all that important. What I think is important is having a look at what money there is to divide up. You have a few other little things I was going to mention. There's a few doomsdayers out there.
I'm sorry to interrupt. We've got to wrap up, unfortunately. Can you give a quick 1-minute wrap up? I'm so sorry.
No, you're all right. No, I think I've covered it, Tasha. I was going to just talk about some of where the market's going. I can't see our market collapsing unless something impacts it. I think it's like Isaac Newton's first law, isn't it? That if something is in motion, it will remain in motion unless something impacts it. Now, unless something comes along to radically change the supply of property or the interest rates, because money is extremely cheap here, I can see us just motoring along as is. I don't think it's going to go up another 25% this year, but I do think it will go up. So I'm watching on with some interest with your Fed. I understand the Fed is going to be putting up interest rates 5 times this year. I don't know what impact that will have on Australia. Well, it is now being suggested quite strongly by the Reserve Bank of Australia, our equivalent to the Fed, that we would be putting up interest rates. But that is a bit of an unknown to me. I don't know what it's going to mean with Ukraine. That is a major disruption. But from where I sit now, I cannot see the market collapsing.
That's definitely the wild card for all of us.
Definitely. Well, I just wanted to thank each and every one of you. I mean, I personally learned a lot, and it was so interesting to see that what is happening in Australia is actually happening in other parts of the world, such as in our country as well, how homes are appreciating so quickly. So that is one thing that I learned from being part of Global is, it gives an eye view of what's happening someplace else that could be also happening or eventually come to where we're at. But we're going to have to cut this short. And because of that, I want to thank each and one of you once again, and then make sure you leave your contact information in the chat so we can reach out. And if you have any question, post it on the chat so we'll try to answer or get the answers to you individually. But before we go, I do need to let Adriana speak. She is going to share something about our next event.
Hi, everyone. Well, super short. I know we're running out of time, but I want to invite you all to learn about Colombia in South America. We are going to be doing our Zoom April 14 at 11 a.m. So please be, hopefully you will join us and learn all about how to do real estate transactions in Colombia. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Adriana.
Thanks,
And
everyone.
thank you, everybody. It was very informational, and I know we all are walking away with lots of information about Australia. And just so you guys know, I had someone reach out to me yesterday and say, hey, when are we going to have the train mission to Australia? Maybe it will be in the works. All right. I will see you all later. Bye. Thank
Cheers.
you all. Thank you, Doug.